Well, thank you for staying with us on the AM show. We bring you our big stories. In fact, our big story for the day. It has to do with that Supreme Court ruling, and we're waiting patiently for the ratio or the reasoning behind that directive or that ruling by the court, not just for us as media people, but for the entirety of our country, to find out what went for the august House of Parliament, especially in this very tricky 8th Parliament. But joining us as we digest the issues related to that development, how especially the minority side has reacted to it, with the majority, the chief executive of our country, Akufo-Addo, actually coming to say, respect the decision of the court. We know about the ping pong that is played when there are judicial decisions, but where do we go from here? Joining us for the discussion, Dr. Rashid Draman. He's a gentleman. A very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us on the AM show.
Morning.
Okay, I've heard only one voice.
Benjamin.
Right, two of you now. Thank you so much for joining. Let me take your initial reactions to the ruling from the Supreme Court. And at the point, I'll share with you what your colleague, Professor Kwabena, I'll share with you what your colleague, Professor Jampo, shares. But Professor Safo Kantaka, I'll start with you. With all your time, studying the activity, what does this ruling mean to Parliament as an independent institution?
Thank you very much, Benjamin. Well, we've spoken about this about a number of times, a couple of times, and I had always said that because of the disagreements over whether the deputy speaker presiding should be able to vote or not, some of us suggested that the appropriate place to go was the Supreme Court. But the moment you have disagreements over a law, the place to go is the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, my little knowledge of law, you go there on the point of law. So that if there's a provision in a law that is not clear, people disagree over what that provision means, the place to go is the Supreme Court. And that's the final place, final arbiter. So the decision of the Supreme Court is final. And so I'm happy that at the end of the day, we got to the Supreme Court, and that a decision has been made. Now what we have to look at are the ramifications going forward, how we have to look at this and make sure that we take the right decisions in Parliament and make sure that Parliament functions as we expect it to function. Because we know that for some time now, the whole of this year, we haven't been able to do any substantial work as a Parliament. So for me, this decision must settle the arguments so that we can move on. The disagreements will normally come, but when the final decision maker makes a decision, it binds everybody. And let's take
well, that's the whole point.
And move on.
That's the whole point, Prof. The minority is saying that, well, the ultimate decision maker in this internal affair is not the Supreme Court, so to speak. If you listen to the rhetoric right after the ruling came up, I mean, I listened later in the evening to the minority leader, and he seemed to have toned down a bit on that line of thinking. But the rhetoric has been that we are masters of our own rules. This is what we've had from the first, Parliament in the Fourth Republic through to the 7th, even into the 8th. It's only because now this matter has come up and we fear some manipulation, and that is why this may have gone in this way. And so we don't subscribe to it. How do you react to that?
Well, I think that being masters of their own rules is not absolute. It can never be absolute because Parliament makes the laws and the laws are interpreted by the judiciary. So that idea of they are masters of our own laws, yes, it is true, but it's not absolute. At a point in time, the courts may have to come in to interpret. When they make the laws, who implements the laws? It is the judiciary. And so if you see, in the course of fashioning out a law, you can write a language that may seem clear, but in the course of time, as events pan out, you may realize that there's a problem with the interpretation of the law. And that is why we have opportunities to review constitutions and laws. So when they talk about being masters of their own laws, yes, I agree, but there's a limit to it. There's a limit to it because even after they have promulgated their own laws, they are not the ones to implement and interpret the law. So that is, they should know that.
Right. Dr. Draman.
Now, there is the standing orders can be called as a bio, and it must be consistent with the Constitution. So if at a point in time, there are problems as to whether something is consistent or not consistent with the supreme law of the land, you go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will decide, and they have decided. And I think that is the final decision that we must live by.
All right, let me bring in Dr. Draman, and I know you're on a bit of a time leash, so I'll spend some time with you. With your indulgence, Prof, I'll have more interference, like some have said.
Well, perhaps to find a better word or a different word from interference.
What word would that be?
Maybe getting involved in the business of Parliament, because from what I know, I think all over the world, there has always been, if you like, a resistance by the courts not to get involved in the business of Parliament. I mean, because yes, they have to interpret the Constitution, and even the standing orders are clear, as the professor said. I mean, the standing orders are not absolute. I mean, the orders that are in contention here, if you look at Order 109, I mean, it says it should be read in tandem with Article 104 of our Constitution. So it means that, yes, they are masters of their own rules, but those are not absolute. But you see, there is maybe what we call, in my view, I mean, the mood of the nation.
Are you still with us, Dr. Draman? It appears his connection may have experienced a bit of a glitch in there. We'll try to work it out and reconnect with Dr. Rashid Draman and get his thoughts further. But let me quickly bring you in, Prof. What do you see to be some of the problematic areas of this ruling? It has been said, for example, that on a day in the hot seat and the first deputy speaker has to take the chair, and maybe the second deputy is not available. Let's assume that. So there is only one person sitting in the chair, and there is a matter for discussion, a matter is put up for vote, and the same person putting the matter up for vote now has to leave, presiding over the session, and then go and vote and come back, which would lead to some, vacancy when it comes to who is actually manning the affairs of Parliament. When it comes to this ruling from the Supreme Court, how it could impact negatively the free flow of work of Parliament.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. I think this is pretty straightforward. It is about voting. Apart from the voting right, there's nothing else. I don't know whether maybe I haven't read the full judgment. They haven't brought the full judgment, so we haven't read it. But what I gather is that it is only about the voting rights of the deputy speakers. And for me, I feel that we have overblown the ramifications from this ruling. Because how many times does Parliament vote? Or it's only on few occasions that when they go to Parliament, matters come up and they have to vote. Most of the time, it's by voice. Most of the time, it's by consensus. And I have always said that, parliamentary work happens behind the scenes. That's and therefore, there's a specific item that has generated a lot of argument and disagreement. That is the e-levy. So for me, is all about the e-levy, and it's unfortunate the minority leader said the decision is an affirmation of the passage of the e-levy.
What do you think about that? I mean, the timing and everything. Is this something that is too far-fetched for them to say?
I don't think so. I don't think so. It is a decision. You know, the Supreme Court doesn't stand up to come and say that I'm coming to interpret a certain law. Even if there's a loophole in the law, there's a problem with the law. Unless somebody takes to the Supreme Court, they cannot take that. They cannot start. So somebody took it to the Supreme Court, and I commend the lawyer who took it there.
Justice Abdullahi.
And then the Supreme Court interpreted it. Yes, we must commend him because it has brought some clarity to the e-levy. I think you are being unfair to the Supreme Court and to the people of Ghana and to the Constitution. It's not about the e-levy, it's about us. So for me, we can still function. And that brings me back to the issue of consensus building. And I have always made this. Anytime we have spoken, I have made this point that we cannot do business as usual. It's about consensus building. And the two sides of Parliament must begin to build consensus.
Can that consensus be built? Sat right next to me and said, between now and 2025, there's not going to be any agreement, so to speak, between the two sides, the minority and the majority. Why? He says the majority is not being consultative enough and they are being very dishonest. He cites when, for example, there was an interaction with them, with the minority leader on the e-levy. Next thing you know, and not just once, next thing you know, on the floor of Parliament, they're saying something else. They've not shown themselves to be candid, to be honest, and for which reason there will be no such. How does that work out? It doesn't appear that consensus is going to see the light of day.
I think that statement is problematic. As human beings, as parliamentarians, they should be ready to build consensus at any time. If you make up your mind that within the next 3-4 years, we are not going to build any consensus, we are not going to agree with the majority side or whatever, that will be unfair to Ghanaians. We have put them there to make laws for this country to function.
Hello, Prof.
Side, I think that is very unfair. We should be able to decide that from now on, if the majority side or the government side of Parliament decides to make some gestures of extending a hand to them for consensus building, they should be ready to do that. They should think about what they are not going to agree. What about if the tables turn and the other side also takes the same decision? It means we're going to have a country that will not be working. And that should not be the case. We should be ready to, as Ghanaians who say, Jojo, that's a local parlance. We should be able to have this majority side, the government side,
right,
not extending the hand of consensus building to the minority. But of course, recently, the majority leader has also said that they have had several meetings. And at meetings, the minority side normally agrees to the discussions, the issues that come about. When they come out, it's like, no, we are not going to agree. So there's some kind of, if I should say, some kind of disservice to both Parliament and to Ghanaians.
Very quickly, man. Do you feel the minority is being intransigent and so is, stalling the country in terms of government business? We know, for example, that, well, on the back of not meeting the quorum and all of that, government business has basically ground to a standstill. Is the minority is it being intransigent? Is it being unnecessarily, what's the word to use? Unfair, basically, to our country, to the constituents?
To a very large extent, I'll say so.
Right.
You see, I have mentioned this before. If you look at it all comes back to the issue of the e-levy. And our past experience should tell us that also about holding the government in a way that it will make it not function properly. The business of government has come to a halt, as you said, because you see, when the issue of VAT came up in the 90s, you know, there was a lot of hullabaloo. The opposition at the time said, no, they were not going to agree. It was withdrawn initially, and later was brought back. But when later the NPP came to power, did they cancel VAT? I think it was even increased in terms of the
exactly the percentage,
the value, in terms of percentages.
Right.
Okay. When the NHIS bill went to Parliament, what did we hear? NHIS has been cancelled. It is in the same vein that we have to look at that.
Okay.
And you remember, one of the minority MPs, I think Dr. Attack, was asked a question as to whether they will cancel the e-levy should it pass when they come to power. He said they hadn't come to power, so he was not going to be able to answer that question. If the e-levy passes, and in the future the minority comes to power, the NDC,
all right,
let them bear the brunt of it.
Okay.
It's a direct tax. The Ghanaians who will feel it will decide as to whether it is good or not, and let the government of the day bear the brunt of the passage of this bill, but not hold the government to ransom, such that government business for almost 3 months is halted.
Right.
I think that is not fair.
Thanks.
It is not fair to Ghanaians.
It's not fair to Ghanaians. Professor Safo Kantanka there sharing his thoughts. Hold on for me, Prof. Let me bring in Dr. Draman. Dr. Draman, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. So a quick one. There are even before we get to the Apex Court's decision, you were making a point reflecting on that bit initially. I want you to wrap up on that before we get to what other academics are saying.
Well, I can't remember, if I lost some of my thoughts. But I mean, what I was trying to say was that, when given the mood of the nation, I mean, given what is happening in Parliament, if you look at what this decision is going to do, rather than, for me, I mean, from where I sit, I mean, and looking at the business of Parliament, I mean, rather than bring the two sides together, we are already seeing, very stark divisions. And the professor said that this is just simply about voting rights. I mean,
right.
I disagree with that. It goes beyond that. It's about balance of power. I mean, because of, you heard them dragging e-levy into the discussion and so on. So
because it definitely will tilt the balance of power in Parliament. It will.
Exactly. So it is about balance of power, not just simply in normal times. Yes, I mean, it's simply about voting rights. But I mean, in the times in which we live in, with the 8th Parliament, I think that it goes far beyond that. And then when you talk about consensus, consensus simply does not just happen. Given what is happening in our Parliament, a lot of work has to go into making sure that the two sides come together.
Right.
And that is why some would say that maybe the court, in making its decisions, must always also look at the mood of the nation and must consider many factors apart from maybe what is happening now. I mean, is that if we were in the 7th Parliament or in the 6th Parliament, this wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't have had, challenges about deputy speakers and so on. This is happening mainly because of the split nature of the House.
Right.
And it also means that our standing orders is not fit, for the kind of situation that we find ourselves in. So do
you agree quickly on that? Do you agree that this test, which the Supreme Court has taken up and ruled on, was necessary? Because the same, constitution, we've used the same standing orders and all of that. Do you feel it was apt at this moment for some clarity to be brought on these specific gray areas, if you like, of parliamentary procedure?
If we're in normal times, I would have said 100% I agree. But if from the work that I do in terms of supporting the functioning of Parliament, making sure that our parties with it in terms of the timing, of it. Because, right now, what, we have been doing all this while is try to bring the two sides together. And now, if you have any matter that is taking them apart, then I think it poses some difficulty.
Are you saying you smell some mischief, that there could have been some manipulation? Mind you, the person who took this matter to the Supreme Court is a lawyer. He wanted to know what basically the 1992 Constitution, but some have also alluded from the majority side to the fact that this lawyer has some relationship with the NDC. And so it cannot be said that there was any manipulation in there. Was there? What do you think?
No. I don't think there's any manipulation in terms of seeking clarity. What I'm saying is that, the times in which we live, and for the past how many weeks, no business has taken place in the House. And if we want the two sides to come together, well, I think we have to make some kind of very difficult choices. As a country.
Okay.
If the minority side is saying, forget consensus building, forget compromise and working together until 2025, I think that for me that poses some serious difficulty.
Let me run these by you quickly, then bring in Prof for a bit more, and we can get ready to sew it up. Professor Akufo-Addo writes, consider Order 225, and I just want us to reflect on some of these things so that we stretch our thinking on what exactly this court's, the Apex Court's ruling means. Consider Order 225, which provides that, quote, the chairman of a committee shall not have an original vote, but in the event of an equality of votes, he shall give a casting vote. Can the Supreme Court declare the order unconstitutional because it deprives the chairman, therefore his constituents, of an original vote? I think not. Nor can the court, in my opinion, invalidate the casting vote because it makes the chairman a sole appellate judge of the committee's decisions. He goes on to write, Parliament and the courts are co-equal branches of government, and neither can tell the other how to run its affairs. Your quick reaction to that, Doc?
Yes, when you look at, again, that is where there are a lot of perhaps maybe inconsistencies and some ambiguities, particularly in the standing orders. Because we've been trying, remember, more than 15 years, there have been efforts to revise these orders that Parliament has been using over the years. And those efforts have not yet yielded any positive results. Because if you look at, for instance, Order 109, I go back to that one again, because that is what has created all these. And then you read it in tandem with the Article 104 of the Constitution. Order 109 is clear that, when a deputy speaker or any other member is presiding, he loses all the votes and so on that he or she has. But when you go into the Constitution, Article 104.3 or so, I think it just simply talks about the speaker. So you see, there, I think...
there lies the problem, isn't it?
There lies a problem. And so for me, fortunately, the standing orders are still currently under review. And if I look at what is happening around the continent, I think we are one of the few countries on the continent that has a speaker who is not a member of Parliament. And some have said, maybe it's time to let the deputy speakers also be non-members of form a quorum. Because they have all these clearly stated in their standing orders. So maybe this, apart from all the challenges that it might generate, I hope that perhaps it will be some temporal challenges, because in this country we have seen situations where the Supreme Court has pronounced, our president, His Excellency Akufo-Addo, has had to disagree with the Supreme Court when it ruled against him, but he said, I respect the decision. President Mahama did the same. So I hope the minority will come around. And my hope is that we'll use this opportunity to try to see how maybe the standing orders can be fit for purpose. And also even assume and imagine, the kind of challenges that are coming in the future.
Prof, for you, verdict, are they fit for purpose? Is it high time we took a very good look at the standing orders of Parliament?
Yes, it's obviously clear. Parliament itself started looking at reviewing the standing orders long ago. I think during the time of President Akufo or so. They have been trying to revise it, review it, but they have not been successful. So Parliament itself knows that the standing orders have some problems and they need to be reviewed. So they are on it. And
it's taken a pretty long time, hasn't it? It's taken a pretty
some way for us to take a critical look because of the nature of this current Parliament. Perhaps if we had done it earlier and we had come to this Parliament, would have been another issue altogether. So maybe by coincidence, it's good they were not able to do it before this time. So this kind of issue to inform some of the decisions in terms of the review of the standing orders. Now, of course, we shouldn't forget that the Constitution is the supreme law. And any other law that is inconsistent with it will be not that 9 is inconsistent with the Constitution. That's Article 104. And that's the reason. And I'm happy about the argument that Professor Azar provides. And that should actually tell us the fact that there are disagreements over the interpretations of the standing orders and then of Article 104. And that is the same reason for which we should always go to the Supreme Court if there's that kind of argument.
But isn't it curious? Isn't it curious? Because these standing orders were basically lifted from the 1992 Constitution. Then maybe to stretch it further, we need to, and I know we've had the constitutional targeting is the 1992 Constitution, isn't it?
Yes, I remember Professor Mills set up a constitutional review. Is it a committee or commission? They did the work. We haven't heard anything. What happened? Was there a white paper? I don't know. So that process kick-started during President Mills' time. What have you been able to do? Over the years, there are provisions in the Constitution that favor governments. So sometimes when people are in power, they are happy to work with the Constitution. Because it favors President, one person controls everything in this country. And therefore, if somebody is a president right now, they sort of happy. They are happy working with the Constitution. But when the table turns, then people will begin to raise issues about the Constitution and all that. Now, I think that we have to take a second look at this as a country, not as a political party, not as a government, but as a Constitution needs some revision, some review. And so, for me, it is about the willingness to do it. And we should begin to look at that so that we develop a constitution that will serve us better. You see, that is why we always review laws. Events come out. When we are making laws today, we may not be privy to or know exactly how things are going to pan out in the future. And things that will happen will let us know that we need to review the constitution. And I remember, the UK has an unwritten constitution.
Right.
People to decide for them. And so it's one of those issues. You always have the means to review what is already there so that you can move on for it to reflect the current happenings.
Right.
And I think that's what we should be doing.
Prof, I have to dispatch, so to speak, Dr. Draman. So just give me
no problem.
A minute or two, and then I'll wrap up in the next few minutes with you on a few more thoughts. Dr. Draman, so at this juncture is the way forward, whether the standing orders ought to be reviewed quickly, speedily, the Constitution itself from that Constitutional Review Commission. And Prof, you were asking, it is a commission. Of course, it was set up by the President himself. And all of that. What is the way forward for you in the short term? Because we need to address these challenges for the 8th Parliament to move on. Dr. Draman.
Let me just put on my, people do interpret it to say it's ignorance of the law. So I'm already putting that out there. For me, what I would have loved to see the Supreme Court do would have been to say, go back and go and take a second look at this, these standing orders of, dating back to the year 2000.
Right.
That is about 23 years old. Go back of revising it, so that way, the two sides can come together and quickly work as we said, perhaps circumstances, we have to celebrate those circumstances that did not make it possible for the revision to be complete. Now is an opportunity maybe for the two sides to go back and critically look at maybe the sections that are not clear, maybe that would have made for more kind of bringing Parliament together at this moment,
right,
in the history of our country. Because I remember recently we were sitting in Parliament and looking at the new standing orders, and each order that we take the Constitution and try to see, is this in tandem? If it's going to.
It appears we have a bit of another situation there, tech situation. The feed may not be too good with Dr. Rashid Draman. I would have wanted him to wrap on that point and then we move on. But if we get Dr. Draman back, we do that. If not, I would just wrap with you, Professor Safo Kantanka. Do we have Dr. Draman back? All right, Prof. So in giving your summary comments to the way forward, I want you to integrate this into whatever you say as your parting shots. Professor Jampo has written that, of course, it appears, depending on where you lie on the political spectrum, you would either be elated or otherwise on the back of the Supreme Court's ruling. And he questions why all those on the side of the MPP are happy with it and all those on the side of the NDC are not. He says, however, it must be noted that per the doctrines of checks and balances as advocated by the French political thinker Baron de Montesquieu, the courts have the right to review and rule on the activities of both the executive and legislature, pointing to the bit about whether they are master of their own rules, that is Parliament. But Parliament is also a master of its own processes now as even more an independent arm of government. It can therefore decide to go by its own rules and work with its standing orders. But this, to my mind, shouldn't be the case, as it may amount to paying the judiciary back to debate if those expected to moderate it take to one side via partisan voting. This question must be answered taking cognizance of the fact that deputy speakers must not necessarily lose their right to represent their constituents simply by moderating debates. What is your reaction to that as you wrap up on this segment with us?
Yes, thank you. I agree largely with my colleague, Professor Jampo. And I think some parts of it I have already mentioned. I think that, you see, the Supreme Court is there for us to settle our disagreements. You may disagree with their decisions, but we have to live by them. That's a simple logic. And so, yes, the minority are against the decision, the majority are for it. At the end of the day, let's move forward. In terms of debate, the deputy speakers are not going to debate. They are not going to be part of the debate. When they are presiding, the only time that they have to be part of the decision making is when there is a vote to be taken. I think that is clear. So they are not going to take part in the debate. But when it is time for them to decide on something by voting, then they may vote. And I think even the voting, there are two types of votes that they have: the original voting right and the casting vote, right?
Exactly.
And I think it's about the original voting right. It's about the original voting right. So for me, there isn't much to debate about. We have to let this stand. Both sides, they should take advantage of this and build consensus.
Building that consensus is not going to be easy. As I sneak in this last bit, that'll be the final bit.
It's not going to be easy, but it can be done.
Right.
It can be done.
John Dramani Mahama, former President John Dramani Mahama has posted, he said, if deputy speakers, because they are members of parliament, can vote while presiding as speaker, they could as well be able to participate in any debate on the floor over which they are presiding. This is the absurdity into which the Supreme Court ruling leads us. You can end with your reaction to that.
I disagree with President Mahama.
Where exactly are your points of divergence?
He has brought in the absurdity. The decision of the Supreme Court is not about taking part in debate. That's a different ball game altogether. It's about voting.
They can do that, then they might as well be able to. He is saying that if you're saying they can vote, then why not just let them, debate as well? Yeah, because that's the point.
They might as well, and I get the
exactly.
So it's not a categorical statement. Yes, no, they can't take part in voting. We shouldn't go there at all. Let us take things bit by bit. Let's go by the decision that is so clear to all of us. For me, what I'm saying is that we should be thinking about how to move this country forward. Purpose that can take this country forward. If we have to try to pay back the Supreme Court, as Professor Jampo alludes to, it will not augur well for us. What do we have to do? That's why we are members of parliament. We have a country of about 30 million people, and 275 of you have been selected to represent us to make laws. We count on your ability to decipher between what is good and what is bad, and that's why we've put you there. You are a special being right now, and so it's not about getting the opportunity to lead this country. Times will change. Governments will come and go, but this country will continue to exist. We will continue to be there. But if we put the right measures in place, we make the right laws, the country will move on forever in peace. This is what we need. And for me, as I said earlier, I expect that the majority side will now extend a hand of consensus building to the minority, and the minority should be ready to accept that kind of gesture so that they can sit down and discuss issues that will take us forward. I'm not happy about the way things have rationalized things and move this country forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Kwabena Safo-Kantanka, Research Fellow with Odikro, sharing his thoughts there. We also had Dr. Rashid Draman of the Africa Center for Parliamentary Affairs. On this all-important ruling of the Apex Court, we'll be getting the reasoning of the court likely today. But when we return, after we take a bit of a brief break, we'll be sharing with you reflections, if you like, on the life, the figure, the man, Elvis Koku, through the show, the AM show, on what he stood for. Do stay with us. We'll be back.